The human fleet arrived at Virethi Prime 3 weeks after the destruction of Fleet. Master Virathtor's armada, they came not with 60 ships, but with over 200 vessels captured from the reinforcement. Fleet had been repaired and crewed by humans who had spent 3 years learning every detail of Virethi technology. Now that technology would be turned against its creators. Admiral Choi stood on the bridge of the HSS Vengeance. Looking down at a world that had sent death to her home, Virethi Prime was beautiful in its own alien way, with purple oceans and silver continents and cities that stretched toward the sky in organic spirals. Billions of Virethi civilians looked up at the human fleet with the same terror that Earth's people had felt 3 years ago. Admiral Lieutenant Wang reported, "The Virethi Planetary Defense Network is activating. They still have significant ground-based weapons platforms." "Acknowledged," Choi replied calmly. "Begin broadcast on all frequencies." Her voice echoed across every communication device on Virethi Prime. Translated into the local language by captured technology, people of the Virethi Dominion. "This is Admiral Choi Yunbai of the United Earth Republic. 3 years ago, your military invaded our world. They killed billions of our people. They harvested our survivors like cattle. They broadcast our suffering as entertainment for the galaxy." She paused to let her words sink in. "We have come to deliver a response on the planet below." Virethi civilians fled toward shelters, while military forces scrambled to mount a defense. The remaining warships, barely 100 vessels that had been kept in reserve, rose to meet the human fleet. They were destroyed in minutes. The frequency pulse stripped away their shields, and human weapons tore them apart with the precision of crews who had spent years training for exactly this moment. "Admiral," Wang said quietly, "the planetary weapons are charging. They are preparing to fire on our fleet." Choi nodded. "Target every military installation on the surface, every shipyard, every weapons factory, every research facility. Destroy them all." "But Admiral," another officer spoke up hesitantly, "our fire patterns will cause massive civilian casualties." The Virethi built their military infrastructure inside population centers. Choi turned to face the officer. "Adjust targeting parameters to minimize civilian impact. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to ensure they can never threaten anyone again." The bombardment began. Human ships rained fire down on military targets across Virethi Prime, striking with surgical precision that the Virethi themselves had never bothered to employ against Earth. Shipyards exploded into debris weapons. Factories collapsed into rubble. Research facilities vanished in balls of plasma fire, but the civilians were largely spared. Virethi watched in confusion as human weapons destroyed everything that made their military powerful, while leaving homes and hospitals and schools untouched. This was not what they had expected. This was not what they would have done on the surface. Virethi leaders gathered in emergency session as their world's military might crumbled around them. "We must surrender," one of them argued desperately. "They will accept our surrender. They are not savages. They are exactly as savage as we made them." Another replied bitterly, "We taught them everything they know about cruelty. Now they are using those lessons against us. Then why are they not destroying our cities?" A third asked in genuine confusion, "They have the power to burn our world clean. Why hold back?" The answer came through their communication systems as Admiral Choi broadcast again. "To the people of Virethi Prime, your military is destroyed. Your ability to wage war against other species has been eliminated. We could have done worse. We could have done to you exactly what you did to us. We chose not to." Her voice hardened with cold fury. "Not because we forgive you. Not because we have forgotten what you took from us. We show mercy because we refuse to become what you tried to make us. But know this." The transmission shifted to show Commander Park. standing in the ruins of what had once been Sol. If anyone, anywhere, ever touches humanity again, Park said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years of suffering. We will not stop at your military. We will not stop at your worlds. We will find every colony, every outpost, every ship bearing your flag, and we will end you so completely that the galaxy will forget you ever existed. The transmission ended across the galaxy. Species who had watched humanity's occupation as entertainment now watched their revenge with dawning horror. The Nethery Watcher recorded everything from his observation post, his multiple eyes taking in every detail of the devastation below. This is Watcher 793, transmitting final report on the human-Virathi conflict. He spoke into his recording device. The human fleet has systematically destroyed all Virathi military capability. Casualties among the civilian population appear to be minimal. The humans possess the power to commit genocide and chose restraint. He paused, searching for words adequate to describe what he had witnessed. In my centuries of observation, I have never seen a species exercise such controlled brutality. They destroyed everything that threatened them while preserving everything that did not. This was not vengeance born of blind rage. This was calculated retribution designed to send a message. His recording would become the most viewed documentary in galactic history. Its final words would be quoted for generations to come. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not mistake their mercy for fear. They offer both to the galaxy, and the galaxy spat in their faces. Now they offer neither, and the galaxy has learned at terrible cost that there are worse things in the universe than monsters. There are humans who have stopped being kind. 6 months later, Earth had begun to rebuild. Admiral Choi retired from military service, settling on a small farm in what had once been the Korean countryside. She spent her days growing vegetables and trying to remember what peace felt like. Commander Park became the first president of the United Earth Republic, elected by unanimous vote of the surviving population. His first act was to establish the Ministry of Galactic Relations, tasked with making contact with species who had shown humanity kindness during the occupation. There had not been many, but there had been some. Dr. Min Yuna led the new initiative, reaching out to representatives of species who had quietly provided intelligence or supplies to the resistance trade. Agreements were established. Diplomatic channels opened. A new chapter in humanity's relationship with the galaxy began. In the Galactic Council chambers, human diplomats took their seats for the first time. No one objected to their presence. No one suggested that humanity was too primitive for membership. No one met their eyes. The Virathi Dominion, stripped of its military and its pride, faded into galactic obscurity. Their broadcasts of human suffering were deleted from every archive. No copies survived in hidden databases as a reminder of what they had done. Some species tried to pretend the occupation had never happened. Others quietly began improving their own defenses, fearful that they might one day give humanity cause for similar retribution on Earth. Children played in rebuilt cities while their parents worked to restore what had been lost. The scars would take generations to heal. Some wounds would never close completely, but humanity had survived more than that. Humanity had proven something. To the galaxy and to themselves, they had proven that determination could overcome technology. They had proven that mercy could coexist with strength. They had proven that the species the Virathi had, dismissed as primitives, could bring a galactic power to its knees, and they had proven, perhaps most importantly, that silence could be broken, that thunder followed where lightning struck, that Earth would always fight back. President Park stood in his office in New Seoul, looking out at a city that had risen from ashes. His wife and son were gone forever, claimed by the harvesting centers he had destroyed with his own hands. But their sacrifice, like the sacrifice of billions of others, had not been in vain. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through diplomacy, or trade or cultural achievement, through blood and fire and unbreakable will. The galaxy would never forget the lesson Earth had taught them. Some species learned kindness from gentle teachers, others only understood strength. For those who chose to threaten humanity, there would be no kindness. There would be no gentle lessons. There would only be silence, silence that fell across the stars when humanity finished fighting back. Silence that would echo through history as a silence would heal. Warning to any who might forget: Earth remembers. Earth fights back, and Earth always wins. The Galactic Council chamber had not seen such chaos in over 1,000 years. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive amphitheater, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of shock and fear, and something that might have been excitement on the central display. Footage from the Battle of Earth played on repeat, showing human ships ramming, Virathi vessels and pilots fighting to their last breath with nothing but sidearms. Councilor Ven3 of the Netheri delegation stood at the speaker's podium, his multiple eyes scanning the crowd with growing urgency. "Honored representatives," he called out, his voice amplified to carry over the noise. "We must address what we have witnessed. We must acknowledge what we have allowed to happen through our inaction." The chamber slowly quieted, though murmurs continued to ripple through the assembled species. For 3 years, we watched the Virathi occupation of Earth. Ven3 continued. We watched their broadcasts of human suffering. Many of us found it entertaining. Some of us even placed wagers on how long the species would last. His words struck like physical blows. Several representatives looked away in shame, while others bristled at the accusation. "Now we see the result of our apathy," Ven3 declared. "The humans have not accepted extinction. They have not surrendered. They have risen up with a ferocity that none of us anticipated. And they have destroyed a Virathi occupation fleet against impossible odds. What concern is this of ours?" demanded a Krellian representative, his scaled hide rippling with irritation. "The Virathi and humans are settling their own dispute. We have no obligation to intervene in matters between other species. That policy served us well until now," Ven3 replied coldly. "But you have not seen all the footage." He activated a secondary display. This transmission was sent by the human commander. Immediately after the battle, Commander Park's face appeared on screen, and the entire chamber fell silent. His eyes held something that made even the most aggressive species look away. To the Galactic Council, Park's recorded voice echoed through the chamber, and to every species that watched our suffering as entertainment. "You could have helped us. You could have intervened. You chose to do nothing." The image shifted to show coordinates in deep space. "This is the location of the Virathi homeworld. We know because we have spent 3 years studying everything about our conquerors. When we are finished rebuilding our fleet, we will travel to these coordinates, and we will show the Virathi exactly what they taught us about mercy." The recording ended in the silence that followed. Trademaster Goal of the Kalzari Consortium rose from his seat with a calculating expression. "Honored colleagues," he said smoothly, "I believe we are witnessing a significant shift in galactic power dynamics. The humans have proven themselves to be far more capable than any of us anticipated. Perhaps it is time we considered new trade agreements with Earth." Several representatives turned to stare at the Kalzari with various expressions of disgust and admiration. "You want to profit from this?" someone demanded. "I want to position myself on the winning side." Gaul replied without shame. "The Virathi have called for reinforcements. Fleetmaster Virath Tor is bringing 3,000 warships to Earth. If the humans can survive that assault, they will emerge as a major galactic power. I intend to be their friend when that happens." Far from the council chambers, The Virathi reinforcement fleet gathered at a staging point 3 light years from Earth, 3,000 warships, representing the full might of the Dominion's military forces, prepared for what should have been a simple extermination mission. Fleet Master Virath Tor reviewed the battle footage from Earth with growing contempt. "They caught our forces by surprise," he declared to his subordinates. "They exploited a temporary advantage and inflicted casualties through suicide tactics. None of this will matter when we arrive with proper numbers." "Fleet Master," one of his officers ventured, "the humans demonstrated unexpected technical capability. Their frequency weapon disabled our shields completely. Should we not develop countermeasures before engaging?" Virath Tor turned to the officer with cold eyes. "Are you suggesting we delay our response because you fear these primitives?" The officer quickly backed down. "No." "Fleet Master, of course not. Then we proceed immediately." Virath Tor commanded. "The humans have embarrassed the Dominion in front of the entire galaxy. Every moment we delay increases their courage and diminishes our reputation. We will crush them utterly, destroy their planet, and broadcast their final moments to remind the galaxy why the Virathi are feared." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, a wall of destruction moving toward Earth with absolute confidence, back in Earth orbit. Admiral Choi received intelligence reports with grim determination. 3,000 ships, she said quietly, against our 60 surviving vessels. Lieutenant Wang stood beside her, his arm in a sling from injuries sustained during the battle. "Admiral, those odds are not survivable." "No," Choi agreed. "They are not." She turned to face her remaining officers. "But survival was never the objective. Our objective was to buy time for Earth to rebuild, to show the galaxy that humanity will not go quietly, and to make the Virathi pay the highest possible price for their conquest." She activated a holographic display showing Earth below. "In the 2 weeks since our victory, the ground forces have armed every able-bodied human with captured Virathi weapons. Factories are producing more shield-disrupting equipment, and our engineers have made a breakthrough." The display shifted to show technical schematics. "We have spent 2 years studying Virathi jump drive technology," Choi explained. "We learned how to use it. Yes, but more importantly, we learned how to break it." Wang leaned forward with sudden understanding. "You can disable their drives remotely?" "Better," Choi replied with a predator's smile. "We can make their drives unstable when they try to flee or when they push their engines to combat speeds. Their reactors will cascade. Their own ships will become bombs." "Fleet Master, Virath Tor is bringing 3,000 ships to Earth," she continued. "By the time he realizes what we have done, he will have 3,000 liabilities instead of assets." The display shifted again to show the approaching Virathi fleet. "We cannot win a conventional battle against those numbers. But we do not need to win. We only need to survive long enough to broadcast our frequency weapon throughout their formation. Once their shields fail and their drives destabilize, they will destroy themselves trying to escape on Earth's surface." Commander Park gathered his forces for what everyone knew would be the final confrontation. Tens of thousands of armed humans waited in underground bunkers, ready to emerge and fight if the Virathi tried to land ground forces. The Armin had been working around the clock to amplify the shield-disrupting signal to reach orbital distances. Quan Daehyun had modified captured Virathi vessels to broadcast the drive destabilizing frequency across multiple channels. "Whatever happens in the next few days," Park told his people, "know that you have already won. 3 years ago, the galaxy wrote us off as dead. Today, they cannot stop talking about us. Tomorrow, they will never forget us above Earth." Admiral Choi positioned her 60 ships in a defensive formation. They looked pathetic against the backdrop of space. A handful of battered vessels waiting to face an armada, but appearances meant nothing anymore. Only results mattered. The Virathi fleet emerged from hyperspace with overwhelming force. 3,000 warships filling Earth's sensors with hostile signatures. Fleet Master Virath Tor broadcast on all frequencies. Humans of Earth, your resistance ends today. Surrender now, and we will grant you quick deaths. Fight, and we will make your species' extinction last for generations. Admiral Choi's response was simple. She activated every frequency generator in her fleet simultaneously. The pulse spread outward at the speed of light, striking Virethi shields and jump drives across the entire formation for a moment. Nothing seemed to happen. Then the first Virethi ship exploded as its crew tried to reposition, and their destabilized drive tore itself apart. Then another, then a dozen more Virath Tor watched in horror as his fleet began destroying itself from within. What is happening? He screamed, all ships, hold position. Do not engage engines. But panic had already set in Virethi captains, seeing their shields fail and their comrades explode. Tried to flee. Each attempt triggered more cascade failures. Ships collided as navigation systems went haywire. Weapons fired wildly as targeting computers crashed within minutes. The 3,000 warships of the Virethi reinforcement fleet had been reduced to a graveyard of debris and dying vessels. Virath Tor's flagship, its systems failing one by one, drifted helplessly as human vessels closed in his final transmission, recorded by the Nathari Watcher and broadcast across the galaxy, consisted of a single word repeated over and over: impossible, impossible, impossible. Then his reactor went critical, and silence fell across the Virethi fleet. Admiral Choi surveyed the destruction with no joy in her heart, only grim satisfaction that the job was done. Commander Park, she transmitted to Earth's surface. The reinforcement fleet is destroyed. What are your orders? Park's reply came without hesitation. Set course for the Virethi homeworld. It is time to finish this. Admiral Choi Yumbai stood on the bridge of the HSS Vengeance, looking out at a fleet that should not exist. 200 ships hung in the frozen darkness of the Ur cloud, their hulls cobbled together from asteroid mining equipment, salvaged Virethi technology, and human engineering that had been pushed far beyond its intended limits. They were ugly ships. They were crude ships. They were ships held together by welding seams and desperate prayers. But they were human ships, and they were ready to fight. Admiral, the Virethi scouts have entered sensor range. Lieutenant Wang Minjun reported from his station. They will reach visual distance in approximately 4 hours. Choi nodded without speaking, her eyes still fixed on the fleet she had spent 2 years building when the Virethi had invaded Earth. She had been commanding a patrol vessel near Jupiter. She had watched the invasion from afar, helpless to intervene as humanity's defenses crumbled in hours. She had gathered every surviving ship she could find and fled to the outer system, knowing that direct confrontation meant only death. For months, she had raged against her own cowardice. Then she had started planning. Signal all ships. Choi finally said, "We move to intercept. It is time to show these creatures that running away is not the same as surrender." The fleet lurched into motion. 200 vessels of varying sizes and capabilities, all bound by a single purpose. Their crews numbered in the tens of thousands. Survivors from orbital stations and lunar bases, and ships that had escaped the initial massacre. They had spent 2 years training in secret, preparing for a moment they feared might never come. Now that moment had arrived. Lieutenant Wang was young, barely 25 years old. But he had lost everything when the Virethi came. His parents had been on Earth. His sister had been on Mars when the Virethi destroyed the colony there. His fiancé had died defending Luna Base before the survivors evacuated. "Sir," he said quietly, "what are our chances of actually winning this battle?" Choi turned to look at her young officer. She saw the fear in his eyes, but also the determination that lay beneath it. Honestly? She replied, against their full orbital fleet. Almost none. She let that sink in before continuing. But we are not trying to win. Lieutenant, we are trying to hurt them badly enough that they will never forget. We are trying to show the galaxy that humanity does not accept extinction quietly. And most importantly, we are trying to buy time for the people still alive on Earth below. Wang straightened in his seat. Then let us make them remember us forever. Admiral, the Virathi scouts emerged from hyperspace, expecting to find nothing more than debris and perhaps a few hidden stations instead. They found a wall of human warships bearing down on them with weapons charged. The scouts tried to flee. They never made it human ships, equipped with Quan's frequency generators. Stripped away their shields instantly. Missiles and plasma fire tore through hull plating that had never been designed to withstand direct hits within minutes. All 6 scouts were destroyed without sending a single warning transmission. Move to Earth orbit. Choi ordered maximum speed. We have approximately 18 hours before the Virathi realize their scouts are not returning. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. Technology they had reverse-engineered from captured Virathi vessels during their long exile. It was crude and dangerous, with a failure rate that would have been unacceptable under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances aboard the Virathi orbital flagship. Dominion Overlord Virath Ka received reports of the ground assault with growing fury. 40% of his forces destroyed in a single night by primitives who should have been broken long ago. His subordinates cowered as his rage filled the command chamber. How did this happen? Virath Ka demanded. They were supposed to be pacified. They were supposed to be helpless. 3 years we have occupied this world. And now they rise up as if the occupation never happened. Overlord, one of his officers ventured carefully. We believe they discovered a weakness in our shield technology. The frequency they used was far below what our systems were designed to counter. It exploited a gap in our defensive parameters that... Enough excuses. Virath Ka roared, I do not care how they did it. I care about ensuring they can never do it again. Bring every ship in orbit to combat readiness. We will burn this planet clean and... His words died as alarms began screaming throughout the flagship. Overlord, a sensor officer reported in a voice that trembled with disbelief. Hyperspace signatures detected. Multiple signatures. They are emerging directly in our formation. The human fleet burst from hyperspace in the middle of the Virathi orbital defenses. Ships appearing at point blank range where shields and superior technology meant nothing. Chaos erupted as human vessels opened fire before they had even finished. Transitioning to normal space, the Battle of Earth had begun. Lieutenant Wang piloted his fighter through a nightmare of plasma fire and debris, his weapons tearing into Virathi ships that had never expected to face opposition in their own orbital space around him. Human pilots flew with the precision of desperation, targeting engines and weapon systems with the expertise that 2 years of training had provided. All fighters, focus on the carrier. Choi commanded through the tactical network. Disable its launch bays before they can deploy interceptors. Wang rolled his fighter through a wall of defensive fire and released his payload directly into the carrier's hangar opening. The explosion consumed dozens of Virathi fighters before they could launch, but the victory came at a cost. Human ships died by the dozens as the Virathi recovered from their initial shock. The aliens had more ships, more weapons, more experience. They adapted quickly, forming defensive formations and concentrating their fire on human vessels. Admiral, we are taking heavy losses, someone reported. 40 ships destroyed in climbing. Choi watched her display as human icons winked out one by one. Maintain pressure, she ordered. We only need to. She stopped as a new set of hyperspace signatures appeared on sensors. For a moment, terror gripped her heart. Had Virathi reinforcements arrived already? Then the IFF tags resolved, and she laughed with wild joy. 60 additional ships emerged from hyperspace. Vessels that had been too damaged or incomplete to join the main fleet. Their crews had worked desperately to make them combat ready in the hours since operation. Silent thunder began. Now they joined the battle with weapons blazing. Overlord Virathka watched his fleet crumble with something he had never felt before: fear. These humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. When a human ship's weapons failed, it rammed Virathi vessels at full speed. When human fighters ran out of ammunition, pilots ejected into enemy hangar bays with nothing but sidearms, fighting to their last breath among shocked Virathi crews. When human ships took fatal damage, their crews aimed for the largest enemy target within reach before their reactors exploded. Retreat, Virathka finally ordered, his voice breaking with an emotion his species rarely experienced. All ships, retreat to Rally Point 7. We need reinforcements. But Commander Park's virus had already infected the Virathi communication network. Navigation data corrupted as ships tried to plot their escape courses. Vessels collided in the chaos. Others found their escape vectors pointing directly into Earth's gravity, while by the time the survivors managed to flee, the Virathi orbital fleet had lost over 70% of its ships. Admiral Choi surveyed the debris-filled space around Earth with exhausted satisfaction. Her own fleet had been reduced to barely 60 vessels, each one battered and scarred, but they had won against impossible odds. Humanity had won its first real victory in 3 years. Admiral, a communications officer reported, "We are receiving a transmission from Earth's surface." "It is Commander Park." Choi smiled. "Put him through." Park's face appeared on screen, streaked with dirt and blood, but alive. "Admiral Choi," he said with visible emotion, "I cannot begin to express what this means to the people down here. For 3 years, we looked up at those ships and saw only death. Today, we watched them burn. We are not done yet." Choi replied, "The Virathi will call for reinforcements. Their home fleet will come. Then we will be ready for them." Park said, "Whatever happens next, we have shown the galaxy what humanity can do. We have shown them that Earth fights back." Across the galaxy, the Nathari Watchers transmission reached the Galactic Council chambers. Species that had dismissed humanity as entertainment watched in stunned silence as primitive ships destroyed an occupation fleet through sheer ferocity and tactical desperation. The Watcher's final words echoed through the chamber. "You need to see this. All of you need to see what we have awakened." No one in the council spoke. For the first time in recorded history, they had nothing to say. The night sky above Berlin burned orange and red as Captain Beiji 1 led her forces through the shattered streets of what had once been a great city. 3 years of Virathi occupation had reduced it to rubble and ash. But tonight the rubble would become a weapon. "All teams report status," Bay whispered into her communication device, her eyes fixed on the massive Virathi command ship hovering above the Brandenburg Gate. "Alpha Team in position," came the first reply. "Bravo Team ready. Charlie Team standing by. Delta Team awaiting your command." Across the world, similar conversations were happening in dozens of languages. In Seoul, Commander Park Seo-jin crouched in the shadows outside the primary harvesting facility where his wife and son had been taken 2 years ago. In Nairobi, Sergeant Yoon Tae-min checked the detonation charges beneath the main slave processing center one final time. In Sao Paulo and Mumbai and Cairo and 100 other cities, resistance fighters waited for the signal that would change everything. Bay checked her timepiece. 3 minutes until midnight. 3 minutes until Operation Silent Thunder began high above Earth's atmosphere. In a small observation vessel, hidden among the debris of destroyed satellites, A being called simply the Watcher monitored humanity's final preparations with growing unease. The Watcher belonged to the Nathari species, a race of observers who documented significant events for the Galactic Council. He had been assigned to watch humanity's extinction, to record the final chapter of another primitive species that had failed to survive first contact. But what he was seeing did not look like extinction. It looked like something far more dangerous. Attention all units. Park's voice crackled through communication devices around the world. Operation Silent Thunder begins in 60 seconds. Remember why we fight. Remember what they took from us. Remember that the galaxy is watching, even if they will not help. Show them what happens when you push humanity too far. The Watcher leaned forward in his observation pod, his multiple eyes recording every detail as the countdown reached its final moments. 10 seconds. Park announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunder across the planet. Quan Dahyun's frequency broadcast activated through every piece of salvaged equipment the Resistance had managed to acquire. The sound was below human hearing, a deep pulse that traveled through the air and struck Virathi shields with devastating effect. In Berlin, Bay watched the command ship's protective barrier shimmer and collapse like soap bubbles in the wind. Now, she screamed. Human weapons fire erupted from every direction, striking Virathi vessels and soldiers that had believed themselves invincible. The aliens scrambled in confusion as their technology failed them for the first time since they had arrived on Earth. In Seoul, Park led a frontal assault on the harvesting facility. Virathi guards fell under concentrated fire from weapons their victims had stolen from their own armories. The doors that had stood impenetrable for 3 years shattered under explosives placed by hands that had nothing left to fear. Inside, Park found rows upon rows of human prisoners awaiting processing. Their eyes widened in disbelief as Resistance fighters poured through the breach. "Move!" Park shouted. "Everyone move now." The prisoners needed no further encouragement. They ran toward freedom while Park's forces held back the Virathi reinforcements with savage determination. In Nairobi, Sergeant Yoon triggered his detonation charges. The ground beneath the processing center heaved and buckled as explosions tore through its foundations. Thousands of prisoners emerged from the chaos, some carrying others who could not walk, all of them running toward survival, while Yoon's team provided covering fire. The Virathi died in numbers they had never imagined possible. Their shields meant nothing against the frequency pulse. Their superior technology meant nothing against enemies who welcomed death as an acceptable price for vengeance. Their confidence shattered along with their defensive systems. The Watcher recorded everything with trembling appendages in his centuries of observation. He had seen many species fight back against conquest. He had seen brave last stands and desperate resistance movements and noble sacrifices, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not fighting to survive. Their movements showed no concern for personal safety or tactical retreat. They advanced constantly, pouring fire into Virathi positions regardless of casualties, treating their own lives as ammunition to be spent freely. A Virathi soldier cornered a human fighter whose weapon had run empty. The human did not try to flee or surrender. Instead, he tackled the alien and drove them both off a collapsed building, falling 3 stories to ensure his enemy died with him. Another human, badly wounded and unable to stand, crawled toward a Virathi communication array and detonated the grenades strapped to her chest. A group of civilians armed with nothing but makeshift clubs charged the Virathi patrol, buying seconds for armed fighters to reach better positions at the cost of their own lives. "What are they?" the Watcher whispered to himself, forgetting that his recording equipment was still active. "What have we allowed to be created?" By dawn, the results of Operation Silent Thunder became clear. 40% of Virathi ground forces lay dead. The command ships in 12 major cities have been destroyed. Harvesting facilities across every continent burned, while freed prisoners fled into the wilderness. The Virathi High Commander aboard the orbital flagship stared at damage. Reports in disbelief. In 3 years of occupation, human resistance had been a nuisance at worst. This coordinated assault had cost him more troops in a single night than the entire invasion had claimed. Begin planetary bombardment, he ordered, his translator rendering his rage into cold electronic words. Burn every population center where resistance was detected. If they wish to die fighting, we will grant that wish. Below, the resistance forces retreated into their tunnels and bunkers as Virathi weapons rained from orbit. Cities that had already suffered 3 years of occupation disappeared under plasma fire. Millions of hiding places became tombs, but the humans had expected this. They had known the Virathi would retaliate with overwhelming force. They had prepared accordingly. Deep underground, Commander Park received reports from surviving cells. Their losses were heavy, but they had accomplished their primary objective. The Virathi knew fear. Now the galaxy had seen humanity fight back, and hidden among the damage reports from the orbital fleet was a single piece of information that made Park smile. For the first time in 3 years, the Virathi had detected his transmission. They had received the coordinates he had sent at the height of the battle, coordinates pointing to a location in the outer solar system where no ship should exist. The High Commander was sending scouts to investigate. Certain that the transmission was a bluff or a trap, Park knew what they would find. For 2 years, while the resistance kept Virathi attention focused on Earth's surface, survivors had been building something in the cold darkness of the Orc cloud, a fleet crude and ugly and held together by hatred and determination, but a fleet nonetheless. The Watcher uploaded his recordings to the Galactic Council with a single attached message. The humans have not given up. They have been preparing, and I believe we have underestimated them catastrophically. The message traveled through space at faster than light speed, reaching the council chambers while Earth still burned below. By the time council members began viewing the footage, human ships were already warming their engines in the frozen darkness beyond Pluto. The second phase of Operation Silent Thunder was about to begin. The underground bunker shook as another Virathi harvester passed overhead, its massive engines rattling dust from the concrete ceiling that had protected the last survivors of Sol for 3 long years. Commander Park Seo-jun stood before a flickering holographic display, his face carved with exhaustion and something far more dangerous than fatigue. It was hatred, pure impatient hatred that had replaced every softer emotion he once possessed. Around him sat the remaining members of his resistance cell, 37. Men and women who had watched their world burn while the galaxy did nothing. They are accelerating the timeline, Dr. Min Yuna said from her station in the corner, her fingers dancing across salvaged Virathi communication equipment that she had spent months learning to decode. How long do we have? Park asked without turning. 6 months at most, Min replied, and her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty that came from intercepting enemy transmissions for years. After that, they planned to sterilize the entire planet and move on to their next conquest. The room fell silent, not the silence of despair, for they had moved beyond despair long ago. This was the silence of people who had already accepted death and now only wanted to choose how they would meet it. Park finally turned to face his people. His eyes swept across faces that had once belonged to teachers and doctors and engineers and parents. Now they belonged to something else entirely. They belonged to ghosts who had not yet realized they were dead. Show them the other thing you found, Park said to Min. She hesitated for just a moment before activating a secondary display. The hologram shifted to show a broadcast feed. Alien symbols scrolling across the bottom while images of human suffering played on screen. They have been streaming our destruction to the entire galaxy. Min explained, her voice tight with controlled fury. Every harvest, every execution, every moment of our degradation has been transmitted as entertainment to hundreds of species. Across known space, a young man in the back of the room made a faux smeu. Sound that might have been a sob or might have been a growl. His name was Quan De Hyan, and he was barely 22 years old. He had been 19 when the virus came. He had been 19 when they took his mother and father and little sister to the processing centers. He had been 19 when he stopped being a boy and started being something harder. The galaxy knows, Quan said, and his voice was steady despite the emotion behind it. They all know what is happening to us, and no one has come to help. No one will ever come to help. Park confirmed, we have watched and waited for 3 years, hoping that some species out there might possess enough conscience to intervene. He paused and let that truth settle over them like a burial shroud. We were fools to hope. The room absorbed this declaration without protest. They had all reached the same conclusion. In their own time, hope had been the first casualty of the occupation. Dying slowly as the months passed and the stars remained silent, but it did not call you here to mourn. Park continued, Quan, tell them what you discovered. The young engineer rose from his seat and walked to the holographic display with movements that betrayed his nervous energy. He had always been brilliant with machines, able to understand technology in ways that seemed almost supernatural. That brilliance had kept him alive when the Virathi needed skilled workers for their equipment. It had also given him access to systems they never should have let him near. Virathi shield technology operates on a resonance principle. Quan began, pulling up technical schematics he had stolen piece by piece over 18 months. Their shields are incredibly advanced, capable of stopping almost any weapon known to the galactic community. He manipulated the display to show a waveform pattern, but they have a weakness. The room leaned forward as one. Their shields were designed to counter sophisticated attacks from species with advanced technology. Quan continued, they never bothered to account for simple electromagnetic manipulation because they considered such techniques beneath consideration. He highlighted a specific frequency on the display. If we broadcast this frequency at sufficient power, their shields collapse completely. How did they miss this? Someone asked from the group. Because they think we are primitives. Quan answered with a bitter smile. Our technology is so far beneath them that they never studied it properly. They scanned our weapons and defenses when they invaded, dismissed us as no threat, and moved on. Their arrogance blinded them to the possibility that primitive might still mean dangerous. Park stepped forward and placed his hand on Quan's shoulder. This changes everything, he said. This gives us a chance to hurt them. Truly hurt them. Before the end, he turned to address the entire room. I will not lie to you and promise victory. We are too few, and they are too many. Even with this advantage, we cannot defeat the Virathi occupation force. His eyes hardened into something that made several people look away, but we can make them bleed. We can show the galaxy that humanity does not go quietly into extinction. We can send a message that will echo across every star system until the end of time. Min rose from her station and walked to stand beside Park. I have been in contact with other resistance cells, she said. There are survivors on every continent, scattered and hiding, waiting for something to believe in. If we coordinate properly, we can strike everywhere at once. How many? Park asked. Thousands, Min replied. Tens of thousands spread across the globe. All of them armed with captured Virathi weapons, and all of them ready to die fighting. Park nodded slowly as the plan took shape in his mind. Then we give them something to fight for. He addressed the room with the voice of a commander issuing final orders. Spread the word through every channel we have. Tell every survivor on this planet that in 3 weeks, we strike. Every resistance cell activates simultaneously. Every Virathi installation becomes a target. We do not stop until we are all dead or they are all burning." Quan raised his hand like a student in class, and the gesture seemed almost absurd in this context. "Commander, what do we call this operation?" Park considered for a long moment. He thought about the silence of the galaxy that had watched humanity suffer. He thought about the thunder that was coming, Operation Silent Thunder. He finally said, "Because we will show them that silence can be broken." And thunder follows where lightning strikes. The holographic display flickered and died as the power systems struggled under the load of the Virathi harvester passing overhead once more. In the darkness, Park could see the faint glow of determined eyes all around him. These were not the eyes of victims. These were the eyes of predators who had been caged too long. 3 weeks. Park repeated in the darkness. "In 3 weeks, we remind the galaxy what humans are capable of when we have nothing left to lose." Somewhere above them, the Virathi went about their harvest with the casual confidence of beings who had never known true resistance. They did not know that beneath their feet, in bunkers and tunnels and ruins across the planet, humanity was preparing to show them exactly how wrong they had been to dismiss the species they had conquered. They did not know that their broadcasts of human suffering had only served to burn away every ounce of mercy that humanity might have otherwise shown. They did not know that Operation Silent Thunder was coming, but they would learn. The galaxy would learn, and they would never forget.